a symbol of prestige that reflects not only popularity, but also the influence, dedication, and magical power that an artist has in a fast-changing industry. And behind the scenes, big smiles were seen on the faces of HYBE executives. There was an expression of relief, there was a sense of victory, and also there was pride stored behind their calm look, because Jungkook's victory is not just the victory of a solo singer. It's a validation of their strategy, vision, and long journey from local boy band to global stage dominance. But what makes this moment so exciting is, the award is not just a symbol, but a reflection of the entire evolution of K-pop itself, how the genre has gone from being something considered a temporary trend to a world-shaking cultural force. And in the center of his vortex, Jungkook's name stood brightest. It's not just BTS. He became the representation of an entire generation of Korean artists who wanted to be accepted uncompromisingly on the international stage. But the most interesting thing was not the celebration, but how the public read Jungkook's own expression on stage that night. There was a calm little smile, not a euphoric one. His gaze was more towards his old staff and colleagues, as if to say, "We've finally arrived. This is not a victory that comes suddenly. It is the result of a journey that is often accompanied by tremendous pressure, public expectations, and an inner struggle between industrial expectations and personal idealism." Even in the most grandiose moments, Jungkook still looks simple as always. And perhaps that is precisely what makes him different from many other pop stars. He does not seek to become a symbol, but ultimately becomes a symbol itself. For HYBE, this is like a perfectly closed circle. Those who used to be considered just a one-group boy band agency now have individual icons capable of standing on a par with global big names, even without the frills of BTS. But behind all the spotlight and the rave reviews, there's a much deeper story, a story of strategy, sacrifice, and the human side of a stage that's rarely seen in public. And that night, Korea witnessed something bigger than just victory. They witnessed the transformation of history. Before Jungkook's name became synonymous with perfection on stage, few knew that the journey began in the cramped rehearsal room in Nonhyun-dong, where the air was always filled with the sound of shoes on the wooden floor and the hum of an old air conditioner working hard. At the age of 13, Jungkook is just a shy teenager who is still looking for ways to align dreams with reality. At that time, the K-pop industry was dominated by major agencies such as SM, JYP, and YG. HYBE, who was then still called Big Hit, was barely audible. But fate said otherwise. A small audition in Busan brought her together with the chance of her life. Jungkook, with a voice that is still raw but full of potential, catches Bang Se-hyuk's attention. But who would have thought that the child could refuse? Yes, teenage Jungkook had considered moving to another bigger agency. But when he saw Rap Monster, RM, practicing, he felt something different energy, a hunger to prove himself, and the courage to go against the flow. That's where it all started. Year after year passed with almost non-stop practice. They sleep in cramped dorms, eat instant ramen, and take turns washing clothes. No cameras, no glamour. But one thing has always stood out about Jungkook: his almost obsessive discipline. He never stopped refining his movements, imitating Western singers, watching Chris Brown dance videos over and over again, until he finally created a style that many choreographers refer to as the Jungkook balance. Movements that combine technical precision with natural emotions that are difficult to describe. The peak came when BTS began to penetrate the global market. Jungkook is not only the center of attention because of the visuals, but because the performance always seems alive. She does not dance like memorizing choreography, but rather like writing a story through her body. And as the world began to take notice of BTS, Jungkook slowly formed his own identity. An artist who knows no boundaries, is not afraid to try, and always tries more than is asked. He studied music production, photography, and even video editing. All this was done not because of demands, but because of unquenchable curiosity. That's what makes it different. When many stars are stuck in a comfort zone, Jungkook is instead looking for a new challenge. From an unknown trainee, he is now the face of the industry. And the night she won the Most Desired K-pop Artist Award was just a reminder that hard work, when lived sincerely and consistently, finds its own stage. Because this award is not only a trophy for Jungkook, but also a symbol of the success of HYBE's long-term strategy in producing artists who can survive in the brutal digital age. Today's Korean music scene is very competitive. Every week a new idol debuts, but HYBE knows that few can penetrate the global market without losing identity. And so, when Jungkook released 7 and Standing Next to You, it wasn't just another solo project, it was HYBE's big experiment to prove that they were capable of scoring superstars with universal appeal without abandoning Korean cultural roots. And the result? Undisputed. His songs hit the Billboard charts, his collaborations with Western musicians were welcomed, and global media such as Rolling Stone, Forbes, and The Guardian started writing not just about BTS members, but about Jungkook the artist. From a business perspective, HYBE clearly benefited. But from a cultural perspective, they're writing a new chapter in K-pop history. As Jungkook stood on stage to accept the award, he symbolized that K-pop was no longer an Asian genre, but a part of the musical map of the world. HYBE, who once had only one group, now has a living legend. But ironically, this success actually caused a reflection. Behind the corporate strategy and streaming figures, there is still a human figure who struggles with pressure, expectations, and a great sense of responsibility to represent his country. Jungkook knows that. That is why, even though the world calls him a superstar, he still chooses silence when he can boast. Perhaps because for him, the true victory was not when his name was called on stage, but when he could continue to love music without losing himself. And that night, the whole world witnessed not just HYBE's happiness, but the triumph of a human being who remained humble amid the brightest light. If anyone thinks that Jungkook's victory came easily, they clearly don't know half the story yet. Because behind the lights, the glamour of the stage, and the roaring cheers of the fans, there were long years where Jungkook had to swallow criticism, pressure, even doubt from within himself. The world of K-pop is not a soft place for perfectionists. Every little mistake can be a headline the next day. And for someone like Jungkook, who is used to demanding perfection in every second of his performances, the burden feels double. There was a time when his every expression was publicly glared at, his every musical choice compared to other artists, and his every career decision was commented on by millions of people on social media. But precisely from it, something stronger than mere popularity is formed: mental endurance. From the beginning, Jungkook had an almost obsessive habit of training. He often arrives early to the studio, even when there is no schedule. Choreographer HYBE once said in an interview, "Sometimes we get tired first, but Jungkook is still there, staring in the mirror, trying to repeat one movement until it's perfect." And it shows how the perfectionism that once exhausted him has now turned into a distinctive strength that sets him apart from many other idols. But what is rarely talked about is the dark side. Such perfectionism often turns into internal pressure that is difficult to control. Jungkook once admitted in a documentary interview that he often feels guilty when he can't perform as well as expected, even when the audience is satisfied. "I know they're happy, but I know where I went wrong," he said in a reflective tone. This is what made the awards night feel so emotional, not because of the trophy, but because he was finally able to see that all the hard work and inner wounds were bearing real fruit. HYBE plays a big role here. They knew that to make Jungkook shine, they couldn't just rely on the big-name BTS. They decided to build a strong solo narrative, creating a standalone career path without having to be tied to nostalgia for the past. It was a risky move, as fans could have resisted the change. But as always, Jungkook handled it in his own way. Silent but deadly. He never responded to criticism directly. He rewarded them with work, from Dreamers that echoed at the World Cup to Seven that became the global anthem. Jungkook showed that he is no longer the golden maknae in the sense of the youngest prodigy, but a full-fledged artist who knows exactly what he wants to convey through his music. This strategy is not only smart, but also bold. Because in the entertainment world that is rapidly changing trends, not many artists can evolve without losing their identity. And this is where HYBE and Jungkook find the perfect symbiotic point, an agency with a global vision and an artist with a keen sense of self. But still, the price paid is not cheap. Jungkook has to sacrifice many things, from privacy, rest time, to personal relationships. It lives in an almost mechanical rhythm. Rehearse, record, perform, then repeat again. But when his name was announced as the recipient of the most coveted award, it was as if all the wounds, all the tears, and all those long nights had paid off. Ironically, it was precisely because of the injury that he was able to perform so authentically on stage. Because true perfection turns out not from being without flaws, but from the courage to face the defects themselves. As soon as the name Jungkook was announced as the winner, applause erupted throughout the room. But out there, on the streets of Seoul, there are other sights that are no less interesting. A large screen in Myeongdong replayed the moment of victory, and hundreds of people paused in the cold of the night just to watch the replay. There are young people who record with sparkling eyes. There are mothers who smile proudly. There are even foreign tourists who join in cheering without fully knowing the context. This is not just an individual celebration, but national pride. Because for Koreans, Jungkook is not just an idol, he is a representation of the hard work of their culture that has been trying to be accepted by the world. In the past 2 decades, South Korea has been aggressively exporting its culture through music, drama, and film. But it takes a figure like Jungkook to make the world really pay attention. He speaks not only in Korean or English, but in a universal language, sincere art. Many cultural observers in Korea called this victory a global generational edifying moment. Because if before Korean artists still had to fight to be accepted abroad, now the situation is reversed. The world is waiting for what Korea's next step will be. And Jungkook stood at the forefront of that. Even the Japanese and American media highlight him no longer as a BTS member, but as the most complete K-pop artist of this era. The line appeared in an editorial in Billboard Japan magazine, something that used to be almost impossible for non-Japanese artists. For many, Jungkook became a symbol of a global paradigm shift. He proved that Asian artists do not need to imitate Western styles to be accepted. It is precisely because she is authentic with her accent, style of dress, and her own identity that it is easier for the world to love her. And therein lies the true value of the award he received, not just because of the voice or choreography, but because of the courage to perform as it is. Many Korean idols feel that they have to adjust to be accepted in the American market. But Jungkook came with a different energy. He did not seek to break into the system. He created a new system in which Jungkook's style became the new standard itself. From New York to Tokyo, from Jakarta to London, its influence is felt on every social media platform. And the most interesting? He never looked arrogant. In an interview after receiving the award, he only said quietly, "I just want to keep making honest music." A simple sentence, but it implies a depth that young artists rarely have. Because in the end, in a world full of imagery, honesty is the highest form of courage. And that night, the world finally recognized her, not as a K-pop star, but as a true world artist. For many, this award may mark the pinnacle of Jungkook's career. But for HYBE, this is precisely the starting point of a new round. They know that success like this cannot be allowed to stop at one moment. They had to build an advanced narrative, how to maintain momentum, how to keep Jungkook relevant, and most importantly, how to balance between artistic freedom and corporate strategy. Because now, Jungkook is not only a musical asset, but also a global symbol that carries the company's image. Many rumors are circulating that HYBE has prepared long-term plans for the Jungkook era, a phase in which Jungkook will lead a new wave of expansion of Korean culture through cross-disciplinary projects, fashion, film, even digital technology. Not surprising, because Jungkook's every move is always a phenomenon. When he wears a Calvin Klein jacket, the global stock runs out in a matter of hours. When he wrote a post on Instagram, HYBE's market value could go up. This phenomenon is extremely rare, even in the world of Western artists. But behind it all, there is a huge responsibility that Jungkook and his team must now bear. Because the higher the spotlight, the more difficult it is to maintain authenticity. HYBE understood the risk. That is why, the night after the award, their internal meeting reportedly lasted until the early hours of the morning. They're not talking about trophies, they're talking about the future. Because one thing is certain. Once a person reaches the top, the world will wait to see if he can stay there. And from everything we've seen from Jungkook so far, his discipline, consistency, and boundless curiosity, it doesn't seem like he's the type to stop at the top. He'll be climbing again, probably to a place no K-pop artist has ever been before. And there, once again, HYBE will smile. Not because of sales figures or streaming, but because they know they have become part of history, and that history is named Jungkook.